So overnight, economists confirming that the inflation number is now at 7.9%. That's a 40-year high. So think about it. Inflationary numbers have not been this high since 1982. Some of you may not even have been alive then. So what does that mean? That means that everything you buy is 7.9% higher. Now, the White House has taken to blaming this on the crisis in Ukraine and Russia, when these forces, these inflationary forces, were already in an upturn starting well into last year. But now the White House wants us all to think that this conflict is a pivot point.
Yeah, gas prices, of course, this morning at a station in West Hollywood is now under $8 a gallon. Just under $8 a gallon for gasoline in Los Angeles, just outside of West Hollywood. The average, think about that for a second. The average price was $2.46 when Joe Biden was inaugurated as president. $2.46. So is this all Putin in the past few days? I mean, Peter Doocy asked yesterday Jen Psaki in a press conference, says, are you guys going to blame Putin for everything that you guys are dealing with up until the midterm elections? And she was not happy about that question. But it's a legitimate question.
Yes.
Now the line of attack from this White House, the dialogue going forward is that we know that you're paying a lot more for your bread, for your food. We're encouraging farmers to keep plowing the fields. We want you to keep doing this. Gasoline is through the roof. But this is all Putin's fault. It's a load of crap.
Well,
what
we
does
already
it have
were
to do with
warned.
house prices? What does Putin have to do with your house prices and rent?
What don't the Democrats blame on Russia?
Well, we already were warned well before the conflict started that we could see an 8% inflationary rate out of the White House, out of the Fed. So this is under what they had expected. And by most accounts, they were watching for conflict in Ukraine, but not necessarily expecting it.
By the
right?
way, yeah, and gas prices were I went back into our archives here on this show. Gas prices, I was covering gas hike price stories in November of last year, October and November of last year here on this show. Nothing to do with Putin. In fact, Biden back then, remember, tapped the strategic petroleum reserves?
Yes.
Back then, and as his poll numbers were collapsing under the weight of these gas prices. I mean, so all of this you could say perhaps is as it relates to the elites. All of the American elites that run this show and want higher prices. David, you mentioned this yesterday. We talked about Wall Street. We talked about Wall Street reaping the benefits of this. Obviously, Saudi Arabia reaping the benefits of this. Has nothing to do with Putin. Nothing, almost nothing to do with Putin at all. It's elites in America that are frankly driving this oil shock, as Chris Black writes in this great piece this morning about America's ruling elite responsible for the oil shock, not Putin.
Well, at the same time, the Senate has not passed budget. And so the government continues to run on debt and then create money in order to keep up with its debt, right? And so basic economics, if you just read Econ 101 book, will tell you that when the government prints money and creates money, which it did in the last 2 years since the pandemic to the tune of $4 trillion, then that floods an economy with money that is not as a result of natural growth and inflation as a result. The government wants to take absolutely no responsibility for policy and natural economic forces. So it's looking to point the finger. And this is a very convenient thing to do, even though the United States got less than 10% of its oil last year from Russia. We're saying, well, now prices are higher because we can't get our hands on oil. We can. We still can.
Well, even yesterday, Ted Cruz, not that we want to hear from that guy, but Ted Cruz called on the White House to say, well, now, hey, the natural gas pipeline, everything you guys were going to shut down and said you couldn't do, now's an opportunity for you guys to crank this stuff back up again. Even those from North Dakota are saying, hey, a truly patriotic move right now would be to restart Keystone XL pipeline, get these things back up and running. Of course, that's going to be a non-starter for a lot of these guys. But I couldn't help but think about something Jimmy Carter did. We love to encourage a little bit of historical thinking here on this show, right? I was a history major, so I have a fondness for it. And if we don't understand history, of course, we tend to repeat it, and we often ignore it in the United States. Well, Jimmy Carter, you may have forgotten, nearly 50 years ago, as Justin tweets here, Jimmy Carter attempted to take on the energy powers that be and transition America towards energy independence through clean energy. He led by example, and he put solar panels on the White House roof, you'll recall. He was laughed at, mocked, and Ronald Reagan took them down, and Carter was right.
I don't recall I was born in the Carter administration.
I was born in the Ford administration. Can you believe that? But just to think about that for a second, like this is one of the reasons why you want to look at history here, like why Jimmy Carter didn't win. I mean, Jimmy Carter was basically kept from a second term because of what the oil companies. He was going after the oil companies. Mm-hmm. He was going after big oil. He was in a big way, like trying to move the United States away from the Middle East oil. And this back channel deal that emerged between the big oil companies and the Republicans and Ronald Reagan basically led to his defeat. Now, you could argue, was he a terrible president? You can go all the way down that rabbit hole if you want. But you have to start to question things a little bit. You want to open up a little bit and think about, well, wait a second. If we wouldn't have had this reliance on foreign oil,
right?
If we wouldn't have had this reliance on the Middle East, if we wouldn't have had this cushy relationship with the Saudi Arabia, if we wouldn't have had military bases throughout the Middle East, we wouldn't have invaded Iraq. Imagine, we might not have even had 9/11. Think about this, right? If we
were energy independent.
If we were energy independent and we didn't have to fight wars for foreign oil, we didn't have to go into Kuwait, which was an oil-based war. Mm-hmm. Just think about that for a minute. Just allow yourself to soak that in. I know it's kind of freaky to think about, but President Reagan comes into the White House, reverses course on this energy policy.
Doubles down
on big oil in the Middle East, rips the solar panels off the White House roof, and leads us on a different path.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I mean, it's so hard at this point when you know that the world has had the opportunity to transition for decades and chosen not to. As you know, I was reading this excellent piece in the Wall Street Journal this morning called, let's see. Let me get you the title. Economic Blacklist of Russia Marks New Blow for Globalization. And it's a 10,000 foot, 30,000 foot view at globalization because the idea that we should just have whatever we want from all over the world with no cost to us as citizens, no cost to geopolitics, and no cost to the earth it's a fallacy, right? And so we're starting to see the cracks in that. And so what do we do now when we could have weaned ourselves off of this? And maybe this settles down, right? I can't see the writing on the walls for what happens for the end of this conflict. But I thought this about COVID. If we don't learn from the coronavirus pandemic that each nation needs to be less dependent on foreign imports, then this will all have been for nothing. Well, it seems to have all been for nothing. If we don't learn from this crisis, from high inflation, like what is it going to take for us to learn independence as each nation, right? Each economy, I don't know. I really don't know. And I'm feeling dark about it, if I'm honest with you.
Well,
I think, yeah.
I'm sorry, if I can chime in.
Please.
The thing about with the oil prices, I had mentioned this yesterday, and I think even like the day before, because I think this gets missed by so many people. The gas prices have very little to do with Biden. They have nothing to do with the closing of the XL pipeline. It was all literally orchestrated by investors in big oil that were concerned that big oil was not bringing in enough returns to the investors. So they made them stop stockpiling, releasing oil to the market because they wanted to drive the price up so they could make more money. It literally is these elite investors in big oil that are causing this. That is where it's coming from. And it's like, we know that, but there's still the talking point ends up being like, oh, well, they closed down XL or Biden's doing this. It's not. It was very specifically Wall Street orchestrated this.
Right. And now a new proposal from Democrats would have big oil paying higher taxes on profits only, right? And so any corporation knows how to just not report profits in any given year, but fine. And with those increased tax revenues, which are a pie in the sky, then American people would receive quarterly stimulus. That has about as much chance of passing as I do to get in line for the Queen of England. So, we want to say, oh, we're going to go after big oil. No one really has the appetite for that. And big oil is beholden to their shareholders. They have a fiduciary to their shareholders to produce these big profits. That's how the system works. You can't fault them for really, using the system. We'll talk about this later when we talk about congressional representatives investing in stocks when they do see the writing on the wall. But, if you've got the system and you play the system, it's one of those things you can't hate the player.
If you like this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, we have a membership program. For the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support independent journalism just by going to morninginvest.com/join.
You get access to exclusive videos, plus the ability to join and chat with us live. We really appreciate your subscription, and you are supporting independent journalism.